Diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI. For some, the phrase gives them the warm and fuzzies as the holy grail of corporate ambition. But for others, it's just the latest in corporate buzzwords used to give the impression that an organization is committed to doing good, all while their actions tell a different story. According to a McKinsey research study, when companies get DEI right, they outperform their competitors anywhere between 10 and 30%. So why aren't more companies over-investing to be the most diverse, equitable, and inclusive companies imaginable? Well, it ain't that simple.
Benchmarks change, objectives widen, and budgets get stretched. And the people who are put in charge to lead the change get burnt out trying to achieve the impossible. If we're being honest, in our own lives, we felt burned by DEI work. We believed when they said change was coming, and we worked overtime to help make it happen, only for the result to be more of the same. So we wanted to know what Deepa saw, since she was at the forefront of this work and oftentimes in the room when tough decisions were being made.
I love that because I relate to that so much. For so long, I also suffered with a bunch of gastrointestinal issues. I had an eye twitch, my hair was falling out, and I assumed and I was told that it was hormonal, that it was because of age, that I was perimenopausal, that I was all of these things, but no one ever questioned whether it was related to the environment that I was sitting in every day and that I was participating in the workplace. I am curious.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and the stress of it. And I would tell you the hair part is, I hear most often in the Black women I interview. So the hair falling out is like a common, particularly in the Black community. So.
Yeah, it's real. I know you've been in, like you mentioned, a couple of hundred companies recently. I'm curious on how DEI leaders are interpreting this message. Are you finding that most of them are open to it? Or are you still finding resistance because it seems counter to the narrative that they're trying to push?
Yeah, it's a complicated answer. I would say when I first started, I think there was universal interest and acceptance. I mean, if you're going to have me come in, I think you're more open than, there's a lot of companies that aren't having folks like us come in, right? So I think you're open. I think there might have been more hesitation amongst certain seats, like certain roles or certain people or certain backgrounds. But in general, I was surprised at how warm a welcome it was. I was surprised about how warm and welcoming the white male executives were in particular, because I wrote the book for women of color. I don't do a lot of translation of the book. I don't say this is what this means. I just write it. And in the first couple of weeks, I was really confused. And I'm curious if you've gone through this too, but I had to do a lot of translation because I wrote the book for women of color. In the first 3 to 4 weeks, it was all white men picking up the book. White male leaders saying, I want to do better, but I can't ask people like you anymore because I'm going to be told I got to go educate myself, but I don't know where to go. So that curiosity actually gets me excited, makes me feel like there's optimism in this work. When you talk to actual DE&I leaders, though, they're tired, they're burnt out. They don't have the resources they were promised. They don't have the seat they were promised, the access. So I feel like more of them are jaded than ever before. I feel like employees are probably a little bit more jaded when you look at trust scores and things like that came out this summer. Edelman did a big research project. And so I think in general, people are skeptical, but I would tell you the segment that I thought would be the most skeptical has not shown up skeptically for me. I think there's still some fear that seats are going to folks that look like you and I and being taken from them. And so I always try to, that's the big thing that I think we have to do in DE&I spaces. Is that's not the work. The work is not redistribution. The work is the system is broken, and how do we actually expand so there's more seats? And I think anytime you get into a seat's being taken from a white man and given to one of us, right? That's where there's discomfort. So I just talk about that openly, and there seems to be acceptance around that. I don't know what happens after I leave, but so far so good. Yeah.
That is so validating.
I know.
Thank you for that.
I'm over here yes, exactly.
Yeah, because that has 100% been our experience.
Okay.
And,
That's
and,
awesome.
and honestly, I can tell you as authors, it was quite frustrating because we have relationships with Black executives, DEI leaders, and many of them were not nearly as supportive or vocal in support of the book and the message. And it felt awkward for us because we didn't want to make it seem as if, hey, you're a friend, throw me a bone. It was more so well, just considering the times that we're in and considering the message And considering your own company's pledges and promises, like it just kind of seems like a natural fit.
Yeah.
But there was not nearly as much support from our Black peers and Black professionals in the early stages as compared to many of our white peers. They, I think, realize that actually it's on us, right? And so I do kind of see that as a sign of progress. But it was also a bit frustrating for us because
I totally share that.
It felt as if, people who were put in positions of power to lead this change were actually afraid to create the change, to do the things that they were actually put in a position to do.
I think that's true.
And so with that said, kind of thinking about that as a former senior level executive, to what extent do you empathize really with your peers, your peer group, right? I mean, because we know being a senior leader is difficult. You've got a laundry list of impossible tasks. Things are moving fast. You've got shrinking budgets. And, to what extent do you understand? And what do you think, I think people who are, I guess, employees or, aspiring to work for companies, what do you think that they don't understand about how difficult and challenging those roles or that work is?
Yeah, I have so many things. I mean, that's a podcast in itself or a discussion in itself. I also should say, I think part of why, I started with, I think it depends on where you ask this question and the timing of it, is I also think there's this looming recession conversation that by default puts real pressure on DE&I. And that's inevitably, every conversation I end up having is, well, do you think it's going to be the same in the next 3 to 5 months because of the looming recession? The fact that we think we can, downplay this work, or this is work that is, only done when the economy is great or we have extra funds, quote unquote, is I think part of the challenge, right, is a real issue. I think for leaders, the challenge is, and I talk about this quite a bit in my own work, is that there's a pressure to conform as you rise. And I found this for the women of color too, right? The reason I did the book was there was a senior woman of color in one of the first dinners that I did with my now business partner, but she was sitting there as we didn't know we were going to do a project. I didn't know I was going to do a book. We were just kind of talking. And she said, she's a public company CFO, a Black woman. And she said, I sat in a seat of power because she was close to retirement, and I don't feel powerful. And I kept hearing that over and over and over again from the women that I interviewed. So I would say, I think it's real for the people of color. I think the sense of you have to give off pieces of your identity, mute yourself, show up in a very, whitewashed version of what we think leadership is real and true. And we have not talked about or unpacked enough what that does to us, right? The health implications, but also the psychological implications. But I think for leaders who are not that, I think one, it's hard to understand. I think it's hard to manage. And I also think COVID has brought all these issues that we didn't fully understand. And a lot of leaders we have in place are great at P&L management, but they're not culture leaders. And I think what we're seeing in 2023 and beyond is that leaders, culture is core to how you run companies and success in a different way that we ever understood, even 2 years ago, even a year ago. I think it's front and center. And if you don't know how to do that, everything else falls away, but we're still catching up a little bit to that message, right? And employees who see that, employees are making choices on where to work and how long they stay based, yes, on what leaders say, but what companies do. There's a lot more transparency, a lot more honesty, and a lot more walking with your feet than I think I ever saw, right? Growing up in companies or being in corporate America. I think it's really changed. I think it's only going to continue to change.
Yeah, I think that's, it leads me to my next question, which is, there's a long list of factors that people consider when they're thinking about places to work. And I agree with you, culture is at the top of that list. But given how long we have to wait for progress in the DEI space, where do you think people of color should put DEI efforts or enthusiasm or focus within that list of factors they should be looking for with companies that they want to work for?
Yeah. I mean, I think it should be there, but I think that statement alone means so many different things to different people. So I almost feel that success can mean leadership at the top. Does the leadership team look like the rest of society? It can mean advancement and promotion. It can mean hiring numbers. So I just think saying that companies do good on DE&I doesn't say enough. I think we have to get more specific. So yes, I think it's important, but it's almost like the truth is in the details.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Cashing Out the podcast. To see more videos like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to turn on your notifications. To get your copy of Cashing Out the book, visit Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, or download the audiobook on Audible.